Welcome to Life Talks Virtual, hosted by Halton Alive. The purpose of our Life Talks conferences is to gather, learn, and envision a better way forward when it comes to life issues. As an organization, we believe in promoting the value of human life through the power of education and resources. We approach these issues through truth and a lens of grace and compassion. We know that when people have the right knowledge and community to surround them, they're able to make choices for life, even in the most difficult circumstances. Today, we will be sharing a presentation from Jennifer Burley at our past Life Talks conference. Jennifer Burley is a local speaker passionate about sharing a message of grace and hope. She reaches out to women in unplanned pregnancies as well as women wounded by past abortions by sharing her own testimony, both of an unplanned pregnancy in her own life and that of her teenage daughters. Jennifer and her daughter were featured in an Oprah TV series called My Baby is Having a Baby in 2017. She's a busy mother of 4 and a grandmother to 2 grandsons. In addition to working full-time, she is learning about becoming a pastor's wife, supporting her husband David, and sharing the amazing grace of her Savior Jesus Christ. Enjoy her testimony and presentation.
Good morning, everyone. I think this is the first time I've ever shared my story publicly, so please bear with me. This is my story to tell. I didn't need to memorize it, but I wrote it down anyways, just so in case I got nervous, I didn't want to lose my spot. So my name is Jennifer Burley. I am a full-time wife and mother of 4, as well as working full-time outside the home. I also have 2 precious grandchildren. I'm here today to share with you about my first child, the one that made me a mother, the one I did not protect. I was 18 and I was finishing high school. I had been dating a boy for almost 2 years when I found out I was pregnant. I remember clearly that day. I got a phone call from our family physician. And when he first told me, I was actually excited. My heart leapt. And I went and told my mother, but she was not at all happy. "Oh no," she said. And it was like her worst fear come true. And when we told my boyfriend and his mother, they were not pleased. All his mother could think about was, oh, what about his university? What about his career? It was all about him. My father silenced everyone's worry with one word: abortion. I had it in my head that I could disappear somewhere and go to a home for unwed mothers somewhere until the baby was born, but there was to be no discussion, no options. My boyfriend and his family seemed relieved that somebody else was going to take care of their worries. The truth is, my father didn't want to risk shame or embarrassment from other family members or friends. My grandmother was over visiting from Scotland, and we didn't even tell her. The day came for my procedure. And I don't remember what story we told my grandmother, but my mother dropped me off at the hospital in the morning and took my grand shopping for the day. The plan was that my father would pick me up after 5 when he finished work. And as I began signing the paperwork at the hospital, I felt the full weight of responsibility. I was 18. By signing the papers, I was giving them permission to take my baby. As I lay in the cold operating room waiting to be put to sleep, the room felt thick with judgment. At least that's how I felt. I spoke with a nurse briefly, and the only thing I could say was, "It will be over quickly, right?" But in my heart, I was saying, do I really have to go through with this? Is there another way? I woke up a short time later. I was alone, cramping, and I had an overwhelming sense of emptiness. It was truly awful. I had many hours alone in that hospital bed until my father came for me. No one ever asked me how I felt. In fact, no one ever spoke of the pregnancy again. A year later, the relationship had fallen apart, and I was not handling things well. I got drunk, and I walked into Lake Ontario hoping to drown myself. I called my best friend looking for help, but she was too busy working. So I returned home. I told my mother I was upset, that I didn't want dinner and not to wake me until the morning. I then took as many pills as I could find. I just couldn't cope with the pain I was feeling inside. As I lay there waiting for the pills to take effect, I thought about my mother and what I had done. I thought about her finding me the next morning, and it was awful. I couldn't do that to her. She didn't deserve that. So I came down and I told her what I had done. And my parents drove me to the hospital to try and reverse what I had done. It was humiliating and difficult. And when it looked like I was going to be okay, they went home for some dinner and would return later to pick me up. Once again, I was alone in a hospital bed, no boyfriend, no best friend, no parents. After that night, I tried to bury my pain. About a year later, I became a Christian and was baptized. I went on some mission trips with my church. I went to college, graduated, and was looking forward to my new career. Later that year, I was raped. The trauma of that opened the wound of abortion all over again, and I spiraled into depression. I tormented myself for having an abortion. I sensed the Lord's presence offering me grace and forgiveness, but I rejected it. I could not forgive myself, and I did not want to be forgiven. Earlier the next year, I found myself trapped in an abusive relationship. I didn't have the courage or strength to leave. I feared I would never be free of this man. And then the inevitable happened. I became pregnant the second time. For the second time, my dad said, abortion, especially knowing who the father was. This time I said, no, absolutely not. I told him he had no idea what I went through, and I would never do it again. My only options were to keep the baby or to put it up for adoption. I sought support from a pregnancy care center in Markham, and they walked me through what adoption would look like, what being a single parent would look like. And I chose to parent my child. Amy Grace came into the world and changed my life forever. Her middle name is Grace because I knew in my heart God was making me a promise that His grace would see me through any challenge ahead of me. And He was right. Thankfully, the father of Amy disappeared not long after hearing I was pregnant. I was now walking with the Lord, and He brought a young man into my life who also loved the Lord. We became friends, and a love developed between us. We were married just before Amy turned 2, and we had 3 more children together. Years later, my past still haunted me. I was terrified somebody in the church would find out my deep, dark secret. I was afraid of being judged. I had heard Christians talk about abortion and what they had to say about women who had abortions. No one had any idea about my past or the pain I carried. And about 7 years ago, I got connected with a pregnancy care center in Hamilton, and they offered a post-abortion recovery program. I honestly thought I had dealt with my abortion, but this program helped me to heal in areas I didn't even know needed healing. We prayerfully walked through my whole experience, and I was even able to say goodbye in a meaningful way to the child I lost. Jesus helped me to bring my sinful past into the light. I opened my heart to Him and allowed Him to forgive me, to heal me, and restore me. In John 8, verse 12, Jesus said, I am the light of the world. Whoever follows me will not walk in darkness, but will have the light of life. I began sharing my story. Once I opened up about my past and what Jesus had done for me, the darkness could no longer hide where there was light. For the first time, I felt truly free. I was no longer pinned down by shame. There was no power in this secret anymore. May I just say that an unplanned pregnancy is not actually the worst thing that could happen, as my mother thought. In fact, my own daughter had a teenage pregnancy as well, and I'm thankful she chose life, and I have 2 grandsons. We need more advocates coming alongside women and men when they face the challenge of an unexpected pregnancy. People need to know and fully understand what the options are, and we need to share the devastating truth about abortion. It's not a quick fix, and it is neither simple nor easy. Every life matters to God. His word says we are wonderfully and fearfully made. In fact, we are made in His image. We need to step up and protect those who cannot protect themselves. Over the last 2 years, many surgeries have been canceled because of the pandemic. People have actually died waiting for necessary heart surgeries. But did you know that abortions have not stopped this whole time? We need to put an end to this evil. Lastly, I want to encourage you to be sensitive to the hurting. There are still many trapped in the darkness and pain of their abortion. It is estimated that within the church, as many as 1 in 4 women have had an abortion. There may be a woman in the next pew who is suffering in silence. There is pain in the pews, pain we know nothing about. My prayer is that other women might encounter the love of Jesus Christ and allow Him to come into their dark spaces and bring true healing. Thank you for your time and for listening to my story. I appreciate you all coming out today, and it's just nice to be around like-minded people and to be in person for a change. Leah had asked me to talk about the man's role in this situation. And in my case, I was with my high school sweetheart, and when we got pregnant, he really didn't have much to say. I could tell that he wasn't happy about it, and I knew that he never wanted to have children. And he was also very happy that my father had made the decision. He never fought for me. He never fought for our child. And he certainly wasn't there the day I had the abortion. He wasn't at the hospital. He visited me the next day, but didn't ask me how I was. And I wonder now if he thinks about it the way I do, because I know that that child would have been born in January of 1991. And every January, I would say, and for some reason it's a he in my mind, I would say, oh, he'd be 5 today, he'd be 6 today. Last year, he would have been 30. So, I mean, that's, remarkable when I think about it that way. But as I began my healing journey, those markers became less and less. It became easier for me. I mean, I still think every January it does come around. When I think about my father, and my father is British, and he's very private and very proud. And he never wants to bring shame to the family or embarrassment in any possible way. And that's why he insisted on the abortion. And he would do this, abortion. And I mean, I could see my father still to this day. Now, just to let you know, both my parents have now passed, but they're both with the Lord now. I had the privilege of being with them as they received Jesus in their heart. And I made my peace with my parents about this decision that was made when I was 18. I say it was made for me, but I do take full responsibility, as I said earlier. And even the second pregnancy, when my father wanted me to have an abortion, to me, if ever there was a reason, it was because of who fathered the second child. There was no love relationship there. There was no future there. I was caught in a very bad place in this abusive relationship that I couldn't get out from under. Part of that is to do with the damage the abortion did, the damage from being raped. I was just in a mental state where it was easy for a predator to come in and just take advantage. And that he did, of my savings, my body, whatever he needed, basically. And I was afraid that when I got pregnant, I had prayed. Let me back up a little bit. I had prayed, after 6 months of being in this abusive relationship, I prayed to God for a way out of this. And this guy used to get angry every night, and he'd kick me out of the house at 2 or 3 in the morning, and I'd sit on the curbside and cry about it and wait for him to come out and make things right. That's just how I was back then mentally. And as I sat on that curb, waiting for him to come out, and he never did, the Lord prompted me and said, "You prayed for an out. Here's your out. I'm giving you this chance." So I left and I went home. And when he called me the next day, as he always did, as if nothing had happened, I said, "No, it's over. We're done. Remember, you kicked me out last night." And it was after that that I found out I was pregnant. And I don't even know why, but I told him that I was pregnant. But thankfully, he actually disappeared from the picture. So, unfortunately, it's another example of a man not taking responsibility for his role. I know that he has another child on the East Coast somewhere, and I had heard that he's had other children since. So my daughter could have, I don't know how many half-siblings out there. But that was another good reason my father said abortion. But I don't know where God gave me the courage, I guess, to say to him, "No, not this time. I'm not going through that, because you don't know what I went through." And I had the opportunity to share with him. And as I mentioned in my story, I went and got my self-counseling. I was living in Pickering at the time, and I had to drive to Markham to find a pregnancy care center to try and walk me through, what is this going to look like? Am I going to go with adoption? Am I going to parent this child? And that's what I didn't know. And like I said, I just come out of this abusive relationship, so I'm so thankful that place existed and that there was a person to sit with me one-on-one and walk me through and look at these options. She showed me adoption files. This is what adoption would look like. You can choose who you want to adopt your child. You can have an open adoption. You can have a closed adoption. I had no idea. And then she said, "Well, if you chose to be a single parent, what would that look like? How would you provide for yourself? Where would you live?" And she just walked me through all these steps. And I need to tell you something about my father. When my daughter Amy was born, my father changed radically. He turned into this big softy. He called himself Grumpy Grandpa. But I actually moved home with my mom and dad for the first 3 months that Amy was born, as I struggled with this new motherhood. And he would get home from work, and typically he would go straight to my mom and give her a kiss and ask her how her day was. But when I was there, he would come straight to wherever Amy was and see, "How is she today?" And he would hold her, and she was this tiny little girl. She was 5 pounds 11 ounces when she was born. And boy, did my father ever change. And it just goes to show you that an abortion is about a baby. This is about a life. And that if we never interfered with that pregnancy, as I found out, you will go into labor and you will have a baby. And that baby will be born, and that baby's going to grow. I don't know if you can see it, but I have on me this gold pin. It's of a 10-week-old infant that was aborted. It's a famous picture that was taken in the United States by a urologist who wanted to see what this baby looked like and took photographs. And those babies develop into kids and into young adults, and now Amy is a mother herself. None of that would have happened if I had agreed to go to have an abortion the second time. So I still grieve the loss of that first child. I have to believe that that child is safe with Jesus, and that one day we will be reunited. Thank you. Well, the first step was me saying no to that second abortion. And that was my opportunity to say to him, no, you don't know what I went through. That was my first chance to say, the pain that I had gone through. They knew about my suicide attempt because they took me to the hospital, right? And again, this was my father trying to avoid embarrassment, because when he walked in the door, my mom had just gotten off the phone with poison control and told my dad what I had done, and poison control said, no, you got to get to the hospital, whether it was pumping the stomach or I don't know what they do. But he said, oh, well, I guess we got to go to the hospital then. That's how he said it. And I said, no, because I didn't want to be a bother. He says, well, we can't have an ambulance come to the house, can we? Because then the neighbors would see, right? So I think that was just kind of his upbringing, being maybe because we come from a British background, I'm not too sure. But yeah, it was very difficult for me. As I mentioned earlier, that day I had first gotten drunk and walked right into Lake Ontario. It was actually March, which was very cold, but of course I felt nothing at the time. But after coming out of the lake, the ex-boyfriend was there, and he was just mad. He was ashamed. He gave me dry clothes to wear, and somebody gave me a lift back home. And that's when I said to him, you know what, I'm just going to go to bed. I'm upset. I don't want to talk. But my mother was a very kind soul, and I couldn't do that to her. I couldn't. And so I went with my parents to the hospital. And when I was still there in ER, and they're pumping me full of charcoal and doing whatever else, my parents said, my dad said, well, I haven't had dinner yet, so we're going to go home, have something to eat. We'll be back in a little while. And that's what happened. And I had, in between those two events, I called my best friend and said, this is what I've done. Like, it was a cry for help. I need help. And she's like, well, I'm working, so no best friend, no boyfriend, and no parents. But I'll tell you who was in the room that day. The Lord Jesus. And he kept me safe. He kept me for himself. And I didn't know it then, but I can see it now, that he loved me and wanted to heal me and restore me, so that one day I could share my story like this, and I could tell you what Jesus did for me. Amen. Yes. Does that kind of answer your question? I mean, as the years went on, my father and I did talk some more.
Yeah, because that's what I was wondering, whether you had a good talk out later on, because obviously you loved your
Amy,
first,
yes.
Amy, and you'd shared that. I was wondering, and then I was just wondering whether you were able to, have good.
He never really realized and openly admitted that this grandchild that he loved, there was another grandchild that he gave up. He never actually admitted that. And we don't know what that grandchild would have been like. But we knew what Amy was like. And she was a storm in a teacup from the time she was born. She was feisty and vibrant, and she still is to this day. She was our challenge child. My husband's here today. We had 3 other kids, and so Amy being the oldest, she was just a going concern. But she was loved by my parents and my brother, and accepted into my husband's family. It just goes to show you what can happen when God creates a child and you let that child live. Yes, I have. It's a very good question. I found it to be very important. Before I got into this, I sat down with my family and I shared with them my story. I shared with Amy sooner than the others because she was a, I don't want to say a wild child, but she was a challenging teen, let's put it that way. So she decided to leave home at 17, about 2 months after she turned 17. And we didn't see her for about 6, 7, 8 months. And she came to visit one day. It was her youngest brother's birthday. And she had mentioned to me that she'd been throwing up a lot lately and she hasn't been well. And I said, Amy, you better get that looked at. That's not normal. And she did a pregnancy test, and sure enough, she was pregnant. All this couch surfing she'd done for months. And my husband took her outside, and he said to her, Amy, you are too young at 17 to be out on your own. And you're certainly too young to be on your own and pregnant. You need to be here where we can support you and we can help you. And this wasn't even his child, but he embraced her and he said, you need to be here. Let us help you. And we did. We went into an uproar. We found, things had shifted in our house and she had left and we didn't really have a room for her. So my brother pitched in and we redid our basement, created a bedroom and a bathroom down there. And Landon was born in July of 2015. So I had basically shared my story with her then because I didn't want her to go down that path. I didn't want her to have sex before marriage either. I didn't want her to repeat any of my mistakes. But she had to know what impact abortion had on me. And that's why it was important. When I got introduced with Ruth, probably summer of 2019 when this book first came out, for some reason, an ad for this book floated through my Facebook. And I clicked on it and I thought, wow, what a book. Like, we need to hear these stories. And I sent her a direct message. I had no idea who Ruth was at the time. And I said, you need to get this book out there. These stories need to be told. And I said, you're probably going to hear from all kinds of women once this book gets out. Because I knew how powerful these stories can be. And that's when I started open to the idea of sharing my story. I had been through the post-recovery program, and I thought, I was still thinking about my home church. And I'm like, nobody really knows about my story. And I thought, well, you know what? It's not just my story, it's God's story. It doesn't really belong to me. The glory belongs to him for what he's done in my life. And so before I began to share publicly, I sat down with our other children and I shared with them my past, my mistakes, my choices. And wow, they were proud of me for sharing and for having the courage to share. And when we started this unborn movement, of course it's during COVID, nobody's getting together in person, so we did it over Zoom. We started this over Zoom. It was a live event, and Ruth was interviewing me, and I was sharing my story. And somewhere in different rooms of the house, the kids were watching online, and my younger daughter said, "Oh, Mom, I'm so proud of you." And I'm like, wow, because these kids have been raised in the church. They know how wrong it is. They know sex before marriage is wrong, let alone abortion. But they're proud of me and for having the courage to share.
Lived through a rape.
I did, and I although I did not conceive in that rape.
But something similar with your abusive.
Yeah, there's many people that say, oh, what about this and what about that? What if it's incest? I encourage you to read the book because there is a story here. And Ruth, if you don't mind, I'll just give them a highlight. There was a woman in this book who was raped. She was married, and she conceived a child in that rape. And she and her husband decided not to have an abortion, but to parent that child. And that child has become a blessing, and they love that child. So I firmly believe that child, conceived in rape, maybe, or incest, or anything else you may throw at me, that child does not deserve to be punished for the sins of the parents. That child is still wonderfully and fearfully made, and we have no business in the womb at all. So even if you choose not to parent that child, There are plenty of parents out there who can't have children of their own who are longing to adopt, and there's not enough children to adopt. They're going to other countries to adopt. Can you imagine those 40 million children if they lived and were adopted into homes that really wanted to have children but couldn't? And that's what, like I said, I encourage you to read the book. There are many different aspects of it. And we're talking about men and their role. In this book, there's also a story of a man who got pregnant with his girlfriend, and she wanted an abortion. And he had no say in it. He fought for that child. He wanted that child. And she wouldn't have it. It was my body, my choice. And he didn't have a voice. So his story is in there, and how he has grieved that loss and his journey. Because when somebody has an abortion, it touches many lives. It's not just the woman, her body, her choice. There's a man involved that helped make that baby happen. There's a doctor, a nurse. There's an uncle, an aunt. There are grandparents. There are many people involved, and there are generations involved, as we learn today through Ruth. A few years back, actually through the Pregnancy Support Center, we got connected with this crazy TV show called My Baby's Having a Baby. And this was aired on the Oprah Winfrey Network. It was a documentary, 10 episodes, and Amy and I were in 7 of the 10 episodes. And they had 3 Canadian families and 3 US families, and it followed their journey about basically teen pregnancy, and that came about through the Pregnancy Support Center in Hamilton. Honestly, the most difficult part was keeping this a secret. You know what, when I think about it, we all have skeletons in our closet. Every one of us is a sinner. We're all falling short of the glory of God. But to me, this sin was dark and deep, and I protected it, and I didn't want people finding out. But once I started opening up and sharing, wow, the freedom that comes when a secret is a secret no longer. And you know what? People will tell you their opinions prior to knowledge of what your past was. They'll tell you how murderous women are and how horrible it is, and it's worse than child molestation and this and that. I saw all kinds of things like this. And they were completely insensitive because they didn't know. I was up on the worship team up at the front, right? This was after. I mean, years later, I'm singing away, and I've gone on missions trips with my church, and you never knew that when I was 18, I had an abortion. But yet you're saying these things, these hateful things, and you don't know. Yes, I had a father who kind of pushed me into it. If I had more courage, maybe I could have stood up to him. But the hardest part was just coming open and just being transparent. Not just about this, but about all aspects of my life, really. And I'm okay with that. I'm okay saying, you know what, I'm not perfect. I am a sinner. I do need a Savior, and I have a Savior. And I'm so glad that I get the opportunity to share that. Yeah. You know what? We've never spoken about it. Even after I was married, his younger brother was killed in a car accident. And I was actually a funeral director by career choice. That's what I went to college for, I was a funeral director. So I helped the family with the arrangements. Very difficult when a 24-year-old is suddenly killed. And I had been with this guy and his family for 7 years, so I knew the family very well. Ever discussed it. The mother never even said to me, how are you feeling? But I'll tell you something very sad. That grandchild that I aborted was her only grandchild. Because her youngest son was killed in a car accident, and my ex-boyfriend went on to marry but never had any children. That was her only grandchild.
Wow.
least my parents had another chance. They ended up with 4 grandkids, and she's alone now. So to me, that's very sad. And part of my post-abortion recovery was going through my story and forgiving each person that had a role to play in my abortion, including his mom, the doctor, the nurse I spoke with in the ER. It's not her fault. I'm sure my eyes said, please tell me I don't have to do this, because that's what I wanted somebody to say. No, you don't have to do this. We can stop right now. There's another way. That's what I wanted. I wanted somebody to tell me there was another way. And I think my message going forward is that we need to get that message out there in the community. Whether it's pregnancy care centers or churches, there's no, okay, so maybe rent is too much, or, we're not organized enough. How many churches do we have? We have churches everywhere, every denomination. They're empty from Sunday to Sunday. Open up your church. Make it a safe place for people to come so that they know what the options are, so they know what the consequences are. Because it's devastating. It really is. It's very painful. And they don't talk about that ahead of time, do they? All I can tell you is the program that I went through, and it was very detailed. It was week by week.
The program was what?
It was a post-abortion recovery program, and it was a Bible study, and there was myself and one other post-abortive woman and a leader. And it was done on a Tuesday night, just privately, the 3 of us there, and we walked through it. There was some homework to do and issues to pray over, and it brought to light each aspect that I hadn't thought of before, like I mentioned before, about forgiving the boyfriend's mother, about forgiving the doctor. It helped to bring full healing. And the way, and this was done through the Halton Pregnancy Care Center, one of the things they concluded with was basically having a memorial service for this child that I lost, that I gave up, however you want to word it. And like I said, I don't know why, but I always thought it was a boy. And we went, and I chose the place. We went down by Lake Ontario, and I played 3 hymns, and basically said my goodbyes. I had a supportive pastor there, and I had a balloon that I released up to heaven, and that really brought me closure. Now that may not work for everybody. Everybody's story is a little bit different, but I'm so thankful I had that opportunity to say goodbye. But you're denied that.
Exactly.
That's what people don't understand. If you have a miscarriage, you have people praying for you,
exactly.
supporting you, loving on you. But when you have an abortion, you're not entitled to
You're
that.
not going on Facebook and saying, I just aborted my baby.
That's right.
I need support.
Yeah, and that's what makes it so, makes you feel so alone in your journey. And that's why we need more women, I think, out there sharing their stories. Because there's people, like Rebecca has sat on that secret for 50 years and hasn't told anybody else. And it can destroy you inside. And it starts with one sharing their story. So after I had gone through this post-abortion recovery, I feel that I was really held back spiritually from a lot of different things. I think because of this deep, dark secret that I had. And I held myself back from the Lord. I held myself back from Jesus fully shining his light in my life and to other people. And I thought, wow, I've wasted all this time, all these years, these decades have gone by. But I have a verse here from Joel, chapter 2, verse 25. And the Lord says, I will restore to you the years that the swarming locust has eaten, the hopper, the destroyer, and the cutter, my great army, which I sent among you. And that gives me hope and encouragement that even though this happened 30, 40 years ago, the Lord's not finished with me yet. There's more work to be done. And he will raise up his army. And I'm hoping that we'll all leave here today and help change this world. Thank you.
Thank you so much for joining us for this featured presentation, and we invite you to join us at the next Life Talks conference in person, so mark it on your calendar.